Yeah, perfect. Welcome, Sumbry.
Thanks for having me. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Perfect.
Awesome.
As always, people can ask questions using the chat tab, and I'm looking forward to seeing their questions. First of all, I will have some questions for you because you made me very, very curious. Let's say you're a visionary founder, you have the idea, you know what you want to do. Where should you search for co-founders?
Oh, that's actually a great question. And my answer to that would actually be, if you find that you're in this position and you don't have like already an extensive network that you can really lean on and rely on, then that should actually be sort of a warning flag. Because I do think at the end of the day, it's all about the network. If you try to do something like this completely blind, there's no way to be sure of exactly what you're going to get. But again, having that big network, even before like you have fully crafted that vision, going out to meetups, to conferences, meeting with folks, going to events like this, because once you sort of have that there, it should be easier to kind of then just really lean into that network and say, hey, you know what? I know such and such has really been interested in this. We talked about this a year ago at this conference. Let me reach out to them and see if this would be something that they're interested in. And I think the other thing is like really using your network. I definitely don't believe in secrecy around like so many of these startups and whatnot. So you should be able to use your network and kind of like throw your idea out there. And maybe you'll find that interested folks will be like, oh, wow, that's something I've always wanted to do. Let me reach out to such and such and you can take it from there. And so I don't have any like specific like tactical thing you should do other than just really relying on your network. It's probably one of the things I didn't talk about this in the presentation, but one of the things I definitely realized earlier in my career and that has paid dividends now is really building out my network. I didn't fully appreciate it at the time, but I just spent a lot of time going out and talking to folks and meeting folks. My sort of last 3 jobs I think I've gotten have all been through the network. They haven't been things that I've actively like gone out and tried to get. Like folks just reach out to me, Sumbry. I think you'd be awesome. It's like and just take it from there.
That's a very, very interesting question answer, because especially in Romania, there are many people that have ideas, that even have a project, but they don't do the networking part, and it's a shame. Yeah. Now, a question from Lucian Corduneanu is, what is the biggest challenge when designing your tech team?
So, one of the biggest challenges is really figuring out exactly what you're going to need, and so I think the way most people approach it is they just kind of copy what other people do, and so that it's like it ends up really being a blind spot. But really thinking through what you're actually going to need and what's unique about your business and like the problem you're trying to solve, like you just have to take the time and actually just be intentional about doing it. And this can be a blind spot. Like if you're trying to build out like a technological team and you're sort of that product visionary, again, you may not know like the best way to do this. This is actually one of the things I struggled with earlier in my career, because I wasn't really good at building out the operational side, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so rather than trying to solve all of that myself, I should have just reached out to my network, found someone I could partner with, and they would kind of really help with that. And so again, it's just really about being deliberate and really understanding exactly like what you'll need. Another way of maybe even describing this is I often feel that companies invent too much technology themselves because they never ask themselves the core question, I'm building this new business. I should just leverage other technology for everything but what my core competency is. And so in that case, what's my core competency, right? If I talk about Uber, we were really a marketplace and we were really a mapping company, right? And those were sort of our core competencies. And so anything else that didn't really help like with that core mission, we should have really looked at, leveraging like other solutions and, not trying to be, the best of breed for that.
Nice. Related to that, what tech best practices can you share with new team designers is another question.
And so, sorry, what technology best practices?
Best practices. Yeah, can you share with new team designers?
A couple of things. I ended I ended the talk on one of the main points, which was to really look for diversity. And this is diversity across the board, because it's one of the best ways that you can assure that you're going to fill out these blind spots that you're not even aware of if you have like multiple people with very different viewpoints and backgrounds and perspective. That can be key. So that's definitely one of those approaches that I would use. The second, and this may sound overly simple, is to just, again, really focus on what you're doing. Don't try to solve a million problems at once. Identify what is the core problem that I'm trying to solve, and just really focus on that. I've made this mistake myself too in the past, but trying to do too much at once, and that's just, you're just going to sort of stumble over that. And that actually applies to technology, specifically like technological solutions that you're going to leverage. Again, keep it simple, especially in the early phases. If you're going to adopt a particular piece of new bleeding edge technology, make sure that there's only one piece of technology that you're adopting like that as a time. Use tried and true solutions for everything else, because you may find, especially when you're starting a business, that you may not be here in, 6 months from now. So don't over invest on things that aren't going to like help you get to that core competency or solve like the bottom line today. In tech or in engineering, we call this avoiding premature optimizations, but it's also true from the organizational point of view, from the technological point of view. Don't go in and over optimize like your code or your business or your technology too early. Like, again, really just focus on that core problem, identifying the core competency and customer, and then just really taking it from there.
Yeah. Another question from the audience. I would be interested if you can share some ideas about how to keep your team on the long run, how to keep them together and motivate them. And I'm interested how you can do this now during COVID-19.
This is definitely this has definitely been a challenge. Even at my current company, but just across tech in general. And so in this particular case, this is one where like a really good manager, and it depends on the size of the team and the startup, but a really good manager is going to pay dividends. Like, when I build out teams, managers like are essentially coaches, and they're mentors, and they're therapists. And so I can't be everywhere across my organization, but, this is also why I'm a big fan of small teams, usually 7 to 10 people in size, with the single manager, because that manager will really be able to give everyone like the time and the resources that they need. And one of the things I've definitely noticed during COVID, this is true with my own current leadership team as well, is that we have turned to spending more of our time as sort of that therapist, right? Where, I found that a lot more of my time in one-on-ones and whatnot, it's just spent talking to people and just understanding how they're doing and just really listening to them and giving them a place to vent, and that's extremely important. And so especially now with everyone, lots of people still working remotely, you can't just be only focused on delivery and like the product and the technology. You have to give just more space, for really like helping folks navigate this and really dealing with this. There's actually a very cool tool and framework that can be extremely helpful. And it's basically called the change curve. And so go Wikipedia it, go look up articles on this. But, I definitely believe in this. The change curve is all about, it's based on like the 5 stages of grief, but it's all about like distinct processes that you can use to kind of navigate change in any situation. And I've definitely relied on it heavily over the past, I guess it's been almost 20 months now, right? I've definitely relied on it heavily because I've used it to both like plot my own path. All these changes are coming in. I'm not going to resist them. I'm going to see what's happening. I'm going to accept the change. I'm going to, figure out a path forward. And I'm basically going to try to navigate that curve, quicker than everyone else so that I can turn around and then help other folks navigate it, behind us. So, and the best example I can think of this is, in the Bay Area, when the shelter in place was first announced, most tech companies were already had their employees like working remotely. And so I definitely think we were leaders from that aspect. But, once it was announced by the city and then by the state, and then 2 weeks changed to 4 weeks, I remember thinking at the time, wow, okay, so I'm pretty sure we're not going to get back in the offices anytime soon. I don't think everybody else is quite convinced of that yet. So what are the things that I need to start doing differently to mentally prepare for that eventuality? And then how can I help my team navigate that as well? And again, it did include lots of things like, okay, I need to have more one-on-ones. I need to meet with more folks. I need to like check in, sending out surveys to the team, like just figuring out all these different ways that we sort of needed to change like the way that we're doing things. And one of the things I would say here as well, and this kind of ties back into the designing aspect, you have to be deliberate. You can't just keep doing the same things that you did, before COVID-19 and use the same processes. You have to really be thinking about like, okay, let me design, and I know a lot of companies are still thinking through this, but how can we work in a more asynchronous way? How can we work in a way that's kind of accepting the realities of, everyone, not coming back into the office, et cetera, and really being intentional about that. And again, designing that as well.
So we should keep this in mind, even if the pandemic subsides. And at Airbnb, do you think that these at least mixed system will continue?
So this is my own personal belief, but I don't think we are ever going to go back to the way it was. I think too many of us have had a taste of the good life, right?
Yeah.
And I think our priorities have just shifted. And so I do think it's going to be different. I don't think anyone has actually figured out exactly how yet. I still feel like most of the tech industry, we're going off of momentum, right? We had spent years working in office and in person, and then we switched to remote working, but we had all those previous years of experience and momentum. So it's kind of masking, or hiding some of the true like complexities with working in this new environment. And I do think a lot of companies, like we're going to have to take the time to be intentional and really design what this like new way of working is actually going to be. And then, kind of slowly like moving over to that as well. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be exactly like how it is today. I do think with Airbnb, we have this great opportunity because we are a company about connection and belonging and really, maintaining that human touch. And I definitely don't want that to get lost if everyone were to work remotely everywhere, for the foreseeable future. I'd always want to make sure that we still figured out a way to maintain like that human connection and just kind of doing that in a safe way.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. Another another question is strictly related to that. Okay, you manage to change, to shift, to communicate to others. You communicate with teams on several time zones. What helps you harmonize them and not lose your own mind?
So again, this is
as a manager.
So there's no one size fits all approach here, and I'll just share with you some of my own current challenges with this.
Yeah, please.
And I think many of you may be able to identify with this as well. So when the pandemic first started, there were lots of Zoom like social sessions and happy hours, and where folks we just start up Zoom and we'd hang out for an hour and everyone would just talk, or we'd eat lunch together, and that stuff all works great. And we're like, okay, this is gonna work. This is how we can kind of keep like this cohesion together. And then a year later, and everybody is sick of Zoom. Like no one wants to have any more Zoom meetings. It seems like we're having more as a society and not less. You're also using Zoom in your personal life. Now your family and friends are meeting on Zoom. And so we're all sort of sick of it. And so the reality is again, we just have to like continuously evolve these processes. And really, like I'm now in the mode of just trying lots of new things, like let's just try different stuff. Let's see what sticks, even if it only works for a little while and then we switch to something else. At least it worked for a little while. And I think we have to be realistic about that. So I'm in the experimentation phase, trying lots of stuff to kind of see what works. But I definitely think that's the key. Eventually over time, we'll start like using like what works well and what doesn't, and using that to kind of, again, design, like this ultimate thing that we're going to end up with in the future. But again, I think it's a process. I don't think anybody has any concrete answers yet. I think it's different depending on the size of the team and the company and the organization. But I do think, you definitely have to be intentional. But yeah, some of the more specific things that I've done, is lots of social stuff within the teams, doing offsites, but figuring out more creative ways to do offsites. So it's not just one person talking to a room full of people, for 8 hours a day, but figuring more creative ways of like interacting and whatnot, doing more breakout sessions, smaller groups, really mixing and matching things. In addition to that, playing around with lots of different technologies. There's a lot of cool things that are kind of evolving, like how you can actually do meetings. And so lots of like whiteboarding tools and technologies. There's lots of virtual reality stuff and AR that's kind of popping up as well. Like, let's just try it all. Like, let's see what works. And if it works, it works.
Yeah. Two more questions from me. One is you have a lot of experience being successful with a company and then going to another company. What would be the most important lesson that you learned when switching companies and coming with that aura of success?
So a couple things here. One is that know what I want before like I like ever leave a company. So be very clear that I'm not leaving a company just to leave it, but that I've got some other end goal in mind, and I'm very clear about what that is. And then when joining a new company, don't come in with like preconceived notions. You're obviously going to rely on a lot of your own experience, but take a little bit of time to learn the company and its culture, understand the context within which decisions were made. Like, the number one thing I see people do that drives me crazy is to join a new company and within a couple of weeks say, well, at such and such company we did X, why aren't we doing that here? And I'm just like, okay, you know what, I've heard this about 100 times. Like, I'm actually getting tired of just explaining this over and over. But yeah, you really want to take the time to understand like the nuances and the specifics about the company that you're at and the context with which a lot of decisions were made before jumping to conclusions.
Yeah. And one more question, if you can answer it, of course. What's the most exciting thing that Airbnb is developing right now and that you can talk about?
I can't actually talk about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I will say this: our CEO has talked about it, quite a bit. That Airbnb is changing as the world changes, because how people use our product has actually been evolving and changing as well. You can look at some of his keynotes, to kind of see that. So I think our job as a technology company, and this is true of most companies as well, is to just really ensure that we're doing all the right things to enable the company to be flexible, to still maintain the high quality of service. But we're all like, everything's changing right now, right? And so, as you're even working within your own company, you want to make sure you're nimble enough to quickly adopt to new trends and things like that as you see them changing, and really to take advantage of it. I think there's one thing that we've learned through the entire pandemic. It's the companies that have managed to like survive and thrive have also been the most adaptable. Like, they very quickly saw that things were changing, again, navigating that change curve. And then they pivoted to, as a result, they quickly adopted online presence. For example, if you look at restaurants, the ones that are doing very well, had great online presences. The ones that aren't, they really, really struggled with that. And so again, it's all about being adaptable and being able to pivot quickly. There's lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline. I can't talk about any of it, but just stay tuned.
Okay. And the last question is from the audience. If you would start a new company next week, what would it be about?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. You can see from my background that I'm really interested in music, and in DJing and music producing and whatnot. So maybe something in that space. I also have a strong background in platforms and infrastructure. And so solving really interesting, like scaling problems or platform problems is another like sweet spot of mine. And so I know those two things are completely opposite to each other. But, if I was going to do something, it would probably be in one of those spaces.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and for your answers. And hopefully we will have news from Airbnb soon about those developments.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me as well. You all have a great day. Cheers.